AITA for walking away after my family chose my wife's ex over my graduation? I'm Cody, 36, and at that point, I had been married to Alyssa for 6 years. I had also been helping raise her 9-year-old son, Leo, long enough that his baseball glove lived in the back seat of my car more often than my gym bag did. I never tried to replace Grant, Leo's biological father. I knew exactly where that line was, and I respected it. I was simply the adult who handled the ordinary days. I packed lunches when Alyssa overslept. I checked math homework at the kitchen counter while dinner cooled on the stove. I drove Leo to practice, reminded him to bring his water bottle, and sat through games where he looked toward the bleachers to make sure I was watching. Grant was around, but mostly for the visible moments. He liked birthday photos, expensive gifts, and dramatic entrances. I got the Tuesday night stomachaches, the forgotten permission slips, and the conversations about why homework still counted even when baseball practice ran late. For a long time, that arrangement didn't bother me. Children need consistency more than they need adults competing for credit. At least, that's what I told myself. For years, the degree I'd never finished sat in the back of my mind. I had left school when life got complicated, and after Alyssa and I married, there was always a reason to delay going back. Leo needed stability. Bills needed paying. Alyssa had her own responsibilities. There was never a dramatic moment when I announced that my goals no longer mattered. They just kept sliding to the bottom of the list. For years earlier, I enrolled in night classes. My evenings usually followed the same pattern. I'd come home, eat whatever was left from dinner, help Leo finish homework, and open my laptop after he went to bed. Sometimes Alyssa sat beside me on the couch scrolling through her phone. Sometimes she went upstairs early. I wrote papers at midnight, drank coffee that had gone cold, and learned how to function on less sleep than I thought possible. Alyssa knew what graduation meant to me. About 3 months before the ceremony, I added the date to our shared calendar and sent invitations to my parents, Nora and Frank, and my younger sister, June. I didn't ask for a party. I didn't ask anyone to travel or spend a lot of money. I just wanted them in the room. Leo was more excited than anyone. "Do you get to wear the square hat?" he asked one morning while I was making toast. "Yeah, buddy." "Do you get to throw it?" "I think they usually tell people not to." He looked disappointed. "That's dumb." "I agree." He grinned. "Can I sit in the front?" "If we get there early enough." Alyssa was standing at the counter with her coffee. She smiled and said, "We'll all be there. Stop worrying." I remember that sentence because I did stop worrying. The trouble with Grant had never been one big, obvious thing. It was 100 small things that became difficult to question because Alyssa always used the same answer. "It's for Leo." Grant would call at 10:45 at night, and if I asked why it couldn't wait until morning, Alyssa would say they were discussing Leo's schedule. Grant would invite her inside when she dropped Leo off, and she would stay for 40 minutes. If I asked why, she'd say they were trying to keep things peaceful for Leo. Grant would show up late to a baseball game, hand Leo a pair of expensive cleats, and take photos like he had been there the entire time. I was the one who had gotten Leo dressed, driven him there, and dealt with the meltdown when the coach benched him for ignoring instructions. Once, after Grant made a comment about how some of us believe kids should have the best, I told Alyssa I was tired of being treated like the unpaid staff member in their co-parenting arrangement. She frowned at me. "You're making this weird." "I'm asking for basic respect." "You're competing with his real dad." I looked at her for a few seconds before answering. "Then why does Leo only come up after I ask why Grant called you at almost 11? She walked away instead of answering. That was another pattern. Any concern I raised became proof that I was insecure. The actual concern never got discussed. Grant's favorite thing was projecting success. He posted photos of restaurants, new clothes, weekend trips, and whatever car he happened to be standing beside. He talked about money in a way people with actual money usually don't. Every purchase was announced. Every event was staged. Every photo had a caption about growth, winning, or providing. Alyssa rolled her eyes at some of it, but she also liked being included in the image. When Grant praised her for being the only ex mature enough to put the child first, she would glow in a way I tried not to notice. 2 weeks before my graduation, Alyssa mentioned that Grant was having an open house the same evening. We were cleaning up after dinner. Leo had gone upstairs, and I was loading the dishwasher. "It's not a big deal," she said. "He just wants Leo to stop by and see the place with people there." I turned around. "The same night as graduation?" For maybe 20 minutes. The ceremony starts at 7. I know. And everyone needs to be seated before then. She sighed like I was making something simple difficult. We can work it out. There's nothing to work out. Leo can see the house any day. Graduation happens once. Her expression changed. It matters to Grant that Leo is there. It matters to me that my family is at my graduation. Don't make Leo choose between his parents. I'm not asking him to choose between his parents. I'm asking my wife and family to attend something that has been on the calendar for 3 months. It's one adult ceremony, Cody. I stared at her. She quickly added, I didn't mean it like that. You did. What I mean is, Leo only gets one chance to see his parents acting normal during a milestone for his dad. He can see adults acting normal after my ceremony. She crossed her arms. You are turning this into a competition. No, I'm refusing to pretend 2 events with fixed times can somehow happen at once. The conversation ended without a real resolution. Later that night, Alyssa came downstairs and said she had talked to Grant. They would stop by his place earlier, stay briefly, and leave in time for graduation. We'll be there, she said again. I wanted to believe her, so I did. A few days later, I noticed a charge for $680 on our joint credit card from a company with a name I didn't recognize. I asked Alyssa about it while we were getting ready for bed. It's for Leo's summer stuff, she said without looking up from her phone. What summer stuff? Camp deposits. Equipment. I handled it. Send me the receipt. She looked at me then. Why? Because it's almost $700. Do you need to audit every dollar I spend on my son? Our son's expenses come out of our household money. That doesn't mean neither of us gets to ask questions. She put her phone down harder than necessary. I said I handled it. The speed of her irritation bothered me more than the charge. I took a screenshot of the alert and let the subject drop. The next afternoon, June called me. Our conversations were usually brief. June wasn't much for small talk, and she had a habit of getting to the point before I was ready. Mom says you told everyone not to make a big deal about graduation, she said. I said I didn't want a party. She made it sound like you barely cared whether anyone came. That's not true. There was a pause. Mom also mentioned Grant's open house like you approved some kind of family plan. I approved Leo stopping by early. That's it. Did you tell Mom that? No. Alyssa said she was coordinating rides. June exhaled through her nose. Her story keeps changing. I don't want to turn this into a bigger fight than it needs to be. I'm not telling you to blow up your marriage. I'm telling you to stop accepting summaries from the person benefiting from the confusion. That sounds like something you practice saying. It sounds like something you needed to hear. I rubbed my forehead. What are you suggesting? Ask Mom directly what Alyssa told her. And pull the card statement. I already saw one weird charge. Then stop arguing about whether you're jealous. That's a trap. Ask where the money went. June had always been blunt. Sometimes that made me defensive, especially when she was right. I told her I would look into it after graduation. At that point, I still believed the evening would go mostly as planned. Maybe Alyssa would cut it close. Maybe my parents would complain about parking. Maybe Leo would be bored. But they would be there. On graduation night, I arrived early enough to find my row, check in, and stand around with people I had known only through discussion boards and group projects. The auditorium smelled like old carpet and perfume. Families filled the seats with flowers, balloons, and folded programs. Every few minutes, the doors opened, and another group hurried inside. Every time those doors opened, I looked. At 6:32, I texted Alyssa. Are you on the way? No answer. At 6:41, I texted my mother. Where are you sitting? No answer. At 6:48, an announcement asked everyone to silence their phones. I checked mine one last time. Nothing. The ceremony began. I told myself they were parking. Then, that they were in the back. Then I told myself the reserved seats might have confused them. When the graduates stood, I could see the section clearly. 4 empty seats sat together near the middle. I had saved them because Alyssa said she wanted Leo to have a good view. I kept looking until the line started moving. Names were called one after another. Families shouted. Someone behind me had an aunt who screamed loud enough for the whole room. When my name was announced, I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, and took the diploma cover. I didn't hear my family cheer. I heard that stranger's aunt scream for someone 2 rows behind me. The photographer raised his camera. I smiled because that's what people did when a camera pointed at them, not because I felt like smiling. By the time the ceremony ended, I was no longer worried. Worry required uncertainty. I knew they had chosen not to come. Outside, people gathered under the lights, taking pictures and handing each other flowers. I walked past them with the empty diploma cover under my arm and found my car near the far edge of the lot. My phone had been on silent. The screen lit up with notifications the second I touched it. There were missed calls from Alyssa, my mother, my father, Grant, and 2 numbers I didn't recognize. Several people had called over and over. The total was 83. Before I opened any voicemail, I saw the social media notification. Grant had tagged Alyssa. The photo showed the front of a large, carefully staged house. Rental furniture was arranged on the patio. Warm lights glowed through the windows. Grant stood near the center with one arm around Leo. Alyssa was beside him. My parents stood on the other side, both smiling in the way people smile when they think they are participating in something harmless. The caption read, "Family shows up for the moments that matter." That caption did more damage than the empty seats. I stared at the photo until the screen dimmed. Then I saw Alyssa's message. "Come home now." Everything fell apart. Under that was a banking alert for an attempted charge of $1,940 from the same company connected to the earlier $680 charge. The bank had declined it and asked me to confirm whether the purchase was legitimate. I opened the card controls and locked the joint card. I didn't know the full story yet, but I knew enough not to fund it blindly. Before pulling out of the parking space, I listened to the first voicemail from an unknown number. A man said, "Hi, this is Mason with Hearthline Event Rentals. We're trying to settle the remaining balance for tonight's setup. The card we were given has been declined. Alyssa said Cody was the account holder and could authorize it. Please call us back as soon as possible." I replayed it once. Event rentals, not summer camp. The second voicemail was from my mother. "Cody, call us. There's been a misunderstanding." The third was Alyssa, speaking fast. "Please unlock the card. Grant still has people there, and the vendor is making a scene. This is not the time to prove a point." I put the phone face down on the passenger seat beside my diploma cover. The drive home took 25 minutes. I used all of them to make sure I wouldn't walk through the door shouting. Alyssa was pacing in the living room when I arrived. She was still wearing the dress from the photo. Her makeup had smudged under her eyes, and her phone was in her hand. "You finally decided to answer?" she said. I set my keys on the table. "Where's Leo?" "With your parents." "Good. You need to unlock the card." "No." She stared at me like she had expected an argument, but not that answer. "Cody, this isn't funny. Grant owes the rental company and the caterer. They were demanding payment in front of everyone. Why was our card paying for Grant's open house? It wasn't paying for the whole thing. That wasn't my question." She pressed her lips together. "He needed help covering a few things. With our money. It was temporary. You told me the first charge was for Leo. It was connected to Leo." "How?" "Leo needed the night to go well." I almost laughed, but nothing about it was funny. A party rental is not a child expense. You're focusing on the wrong thing. I walked across a stage tonight, and every seat I saved was empty. Her face tightened. "That is not what this is about right now." "That is exactly what this is about." The open house ran late. Grant had a problem with one of the deliveries, and Leo was upset. Your parents were already there. We couldn't just walk out. You were supposed to leave before the ceremony started. I know. No, you knew the date. You knew the time. You knew where everyone was supposed to be. And you took my parents there. I didn't take them. They chose to come. Based on what? She looked away. That was the moment I understood June had been right. There were 2 versions of the evening. One for me and one for everyone else. "What did you tell my parents?" I asked. "Cody, what did you tell them?" "That you didn't want graduation turned into a big thing." I said I didn't want a party. "I thought you meant the whole thing. You watched me send invitations. You've been stressed. I thought you would understand that Leo needed us. Stop using him as a sentence-ending excuse." Her eyes flashed. "Don't talk about my son like that. I'm not talking about Leo. I am talking about you hiding behind him. You locked the card during a family event. Do you understand how that made me look? I was at graduation alone. Explain who us is." She went quiet. Grant called while we were standing there. His name filled her screen. She declined it. A second later, a message appeared. Get him to turn it back on. They're threatening collections. I held out my hand. Show me the messages. No. Then this conversation is over for tonight. You don't get to order me around. And you don't get access to joint credit while refusing to explain joint charges. She followed me toward the stairs. You're being controlling. I locked a card after discovering you lied about charges for your ex-husband's party. You're jealous. I'm tired. You are punishing Leo because you can't stand Grant having one good night. I turned around. There is nothing co-parenting about lying to your husband and hiding charges behind your kid's name. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. I am not discussing this while you keep changing the subject. The card stays locked. Tomorrow, you give me every charge, every receipt, and every message related to our money. Then we decide what happens next. You don't get to decide by yourself. You already made your decision. I'm just protecting myself from the fallout. I slept in the guest room. The next morning, I texted my mother directly. What exactly did Alyssa tell you about graduation? Nora called immediately. I declined the call and asked her to put it in writing. A few minutes later, she sent me a screenshot. It was a message from Alyssa 3 days before the ceremony. Cody really doesn't want to fuss about graduation. He says it's mostly symbolic and would rather everyone support Leo at Grant's open house. We'll celebrate Cody privately later. Please don't make him feel guilty about it. I read the message 3 times. Then I looked at the shared calendar where Alyssa had accepted the graduation invitation months earlier. Under the event, her old comment was still visible. We'll be there. Stop worrying. My mother sent another text. Alyssa said this was what you wanted. We thought we were respecting you. I'm so sorry. I didn't answer right away. Frank sent his own message. Call when you're ready. I saved both screenshots. June came over that afternoon. We sat at the dining table with my laptop, the card statements, and 2 cups of coffee neither of us touched. She looked at the calendar, the messages, and the bank alerts. Dates don't have feelings, she said. Put the dates next to the charges and let everyone read. The first $680 payment had gone to the event rental company as a deposit. There was a $420 charge to a catering service that Alyssa had labeled in our budgeting app as Leo Activity. There was a $310 furniture rental charge disguised as school/summer. The attempted $1,940 payment was the final balance for rented tables, outdoor seating, lighting, and staging. We also found a $275 payment from our checking account to Grant 3 weeks earlier with the note, reimbursement. Alyssa had told me that payment covered baseball registration and equipment. It didn't. I had paid for baseball registration myself. June leaned back in her chair. She didn't forget your graduation. She redirected people away from it. I hated how accurate that was. Alyssa had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. I didn't go digging through it. I didn't need to. Messages from Grant kept appearing on the lock screen. One said, "This is a disaster. People heard the vendor. Fix it." Another said, "You said Cody wouldn't make a scene." When Alyssa came back downstairs, I asked her to open the thread in front of me. No. Then I assumed there is more. There is nothing romantic, if that is where your mind is going. I didn't say there was. You're acting like I cheated. You used our money, lied to me, lied to my parents, and left me alone at an event you promised to attend. I don't need an affair to call that betrayal. She sat across from me and folded her arms. What do you want? The truth. I told you the truth. No, you told me Grant needed help. That is not the same thing. She stared at the table. Finally, she said Grant had been under financial pressure for months. The house was real, but his situation wasn't as secure as he had made it sound. He had used short-term financing to get into it, rented most of the furniture for the open house, and invited relatives, acquaintances, and people whose approval he believed he needed. He thought if the night went well, people would stop asking questions, Alyssa said. What questions? Whether he could afford the place, whether he was doing okay. And you helped him fake the answer. I helped Leo's father avoid humiliation. By humiliating me. That wasn't the plan. What was the plan? She didn't answer. I pointed to her phone. Open the messages. After a long silence, she did. I didn't scroll through years of conversations. I just searched my name. The message that ended any remaining doubt had been sent at 4:18 that afternoon, less than 3 hours before graduation. Grant had written, "You sure he won't drag everyone away early and ruin the optics?" Alyssa replied, "I'll handle Cody. He won't make a scene." Grant answered, "As long as he doesn't sulk and make this about his little ceremony." Alyssa's reply was a laughing emoji. I felt something inside me go very still. She reached for the phone. "That looks worse than it was." "It looks exactly like it was." He was stressed. "And you agreed with him." I was trying to keep him calm by letting him insult me. "It was a joke." "No. The joke was that you could manage me because I always chose not to fight." She started crying then. Not loudly. She covered her face and said she had been trapped between keeping peace with Grant and supporting me. I didn't comfort her. "You weren't trapped," I said. "You chose the person who made the most noise because you assumed I would absorb the damage quietly. That is not fair." "It is precise." That afternoon, I opened a new bank account in my name only. I changed the direct deposit for my paycheck and moved the portion of my personal savings that had existed before our marriage. I left enough money in the joint account to cover the mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, and Leo's regular expenses. I didn't drain anything. I didn't touch money that wasn't mine. Then I froze our joint credit line and requested a complete transaction history. Alyssa accused me of trying to scare her. "I'm making sure household money pays for our household," I said. "You're treating me like a criminal." "I'm treating undisclosed charges like undisclosed charges." The vacation was the next surprise. We had put down a deposit on a week-long family trip scheduled for later that summer. I had paid most of it because Alyssa said it would be good for the three of us to reset after a stressful year. While reviewing the reservation, I found an email chain between Alyssa and the rental company asking whether an additional adult and a child could be added to the house. The additional adult was Grant. The child was Leo, even though Leo was already on our reservation. Alyssa had apparently been trying to split Leo's attendance between our booking and a separate travel plan so Grant could stay for several nights without the company flagging the head count. When I confronted her, she said Grant might join for Leo. "I am not paying for another trip where I'm the wallet and he's the family photo," I said. I canceled within the refundable period. We lost a small processing fee, but the rest went back to the joint account. That was when Alyssa truly understood I wasn't waiting for another explanation. "You canceled our vacation?" "I canceled the reservation I was funding under false information. Leo was looking forward to it." "Then you shouldn't have changed the guest list behind my back. You are using money to control everyone." "No, I'm refusing to let everyone else control my money." For the first 2 days after graduation, Leo stayed with my parents. I think Alyssa wanted distance between him and the arguments, and I agreed. Whatever was happening between the adults, he didn't need to hear it. When he came home, he was quieter than usual. His baseball glove was tucked under his arm, and he stood near the front door like he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to enter his own house. I crouched slightly, so we were closer to eye level. "Hey, buddy. Are you mad at me?" "No. Mom said you were upset because we went to Dad's." "I'm upset with grown-ups who should have told the truth. Not with you." He looked down at the glove. "Mom said your thing was mostly for grown-ups." "My graduation?" He nodded. "She said you didn't care if I went because it would be boring." I had to take a breath before answering. "I didn't want you there. But you didn't do anything wrong. You believed your mom. Kids are supposed to be able to believe adults." His eyes filled, and I hated every person who had made him feel responsible. "Is Dad in trouble?" "Your dad has adult problems to handle. That is not your job either." "Are you leaving?" "I don't know what will happen yet, but I care about you, and adult boundaries are not the same as rejecting you." He twisted the glove strap around his fingers. "So you're not mad because I went?" "Never for being a kid in a room adults made messy." He leaned into me, and I hugged him. I didn't promise everything would stay the same. I couldn't honestly promise that. I only promised I would never make him carry blame that belonged to adults. Alyssa watched from the hallway. Her face looked different after that. Less defensive, more ashamed. It didn't make me trust her. 3 days later, she announced that we needed a family dinner to clear the air. She invited my parents, June, my aunt, and my aunt's husband. I knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to get ahead of the evidence by turning the story into a debate about my reaction. I agreed. Really? She asked. Everyone should understand what happened. She looked relieved. I added, all of it. The dinner was on a Sunday. Alyssa made too much food and moved around the kitchen with the tense energy of someone preparing for a performance. My mother kept offering to help. My father barely spoke. June sat near me and watched everyone. Leo was spending the evening with a friend. I had insisted on that. Halfway through dinner, Alyssa put down her fork and said, I think we need to talk about what Cody did. June looked at me. I gave a small shake of my head. Let her speak. Alyssa told them I had embarrassed her at Grant's open house by locking the card. She said I had overreacted because I was insecure about her co-parenting relationship. She said I had canceled Leo's vacation and separated money without discussing it. Then she started crying. He punished a child because he couldn't stand not being the center of attention, she said. My mother's face softened. Frank looked at his plate. I stayed quiet. Alyssa continued. It was one night. Leo needed to see his parents getting along. Cody turned it into this huge betrayal because Grant had a milestone too. June asked, was Cody told everyone was skipping graduation? Alyssa wiped her eyes. It happened fast. That wasn't my question. I was trying to keep peace. My aunt looked uncomfortable. Maybe this should stay between the two of you. It would have, I said, if Alyssa hadn't brought everyone else into the lie. Alyssa's phone rang on the counter. Grant. She declined it. He immediately called again. Answer it, I said. No. Put him on speaker. Absolutely not. The phone rang a third time. My father finally looked up. Why is he calling during this? Frank asked. Alyssa said nothing. June reached for her water. Because this dinner is not about healing. It is about getting Cody to turn the money back on. That is not true, Alyssa snapped. Grant called a fourth time. Alyssa answered and walked toward the hallway. But I said, stay here. She stopped. Grant's voice carried through the phone, even though it wasn't on speaker. Did he agree to release the funds? Alyssa lowered the volume. No, she said. We're talking. Grant's voice sharpened. About what? He made his point. Tell him to be a bigger man and unlock it. I held out my hand. Speaker. Alyssa hesitated, then tapped the screen. Grant's voice filled the dining room. Cody, this has gone far enough. It was a housewarming, not a crime scene. Why was my credit card paying for it? A pause. Some of us can put the kid first without turning everything into a personal insult. Bigger than the man using my credit card for his party? It wasn't your card. It was Alyssa's too. She lied about what the charges were. That is between you and your wife. Then stop calling my house about my money. His polished tone started to crack. You locking that card made everyone uncomfortable. I was sitting alone at my graduation while you used my family in your photos. Oh, come on. It was one ceremony. Alyssa closed her eyes. Grant continued. You need to stop acting like a loser over one night and focus on what is best for Leo. I said, how much do you still owe? That is none of your business. You are calling me to pay it. I'm calling because Alyssa said she could handle this. There it was again. Handle me. My mother spoke before I could respond. Cody, maybe you should have just been happy Leo had both families there. The room went silent. I looked at her. Mom, you weren't there for Leo. You were there because Alyssa lied to you. Her face fell. I stood, went to the sideboard, and brought back the printed statements and screenshots I had prepared. I didn't have a dramatic folder. I had a small stack of paper, my phone, and dates. I placed the shared calendar screenshot in front of my mother. This is the invitation I sent 3 months ago. Alyssa accepted it. Next, I placed the text where Alyssa had said, we'll be there. Stop worrying. Then I put down the message Alyssa had sent my parents claiming I didn't want them at graduation. You were told I didn't care about graduation. That was a lie. My mother put her hand over her mouth. I placed the bank statement on the table. She told me these charges were for Leo. That was also a lie. I pointed to each entry. $680 for event rentals, $420 for catering, $310 for rented furniture, $275 sent directly to Grant. Then an attempted charge for $1,940. My aunt stared at Alyssa. You paid for his open house? Alyssa said, it was temporary. With Cody's money, my aunt asked. Our money, Alyssa said. Money he was told was being spent on your son, June replied. I opened the message screenshot from Grant. You sure he won't drag everyone away early and ruin the optics? Then Alyssa's reply. I'll handle Cody. He won't make a scene. Then Grant's line about my little ceremony and Alyssa's laughing response. No one spoke. Grant was still on the phone. I looked toward the screen. You didn't want family support. You wanted my money and my family in your pictures. That is ridiculous, he said, but he no longer sounded confident. I played the vendor voicemail. The man's voice clearly stated that Alyssa had identified me as the account holder who could authorize the remaining balance for the open house setup. When it ended, the room stayed quiet. Alyssa whispered, "You're humiliating me." I looked at her. "No, you humiliated me in public. I'm just refusing to finance the lie." She started crying harder. "I was trying to help Leo's father. You were helping Grant protect an image. I didn't know it would go this far. You knew enough to lie to everyone in this room." Grant interrupted from the phone. "This is getting blown way out of proportion." June leaned toward the counter. "Then why do you keep calling about money instead of asking how Leo is doing?" Grant said nothing. A message appeared on Alyssa's screen while the call was still connected. "Can you get him to unlock it or not? I still owe them." I picked up the phone and read it aloud. Then I placed it back on the counter. "Notice he didn't ask how Leo is doing." Alyssa looked at the message. Something in her expression finally broke. Not because she had suddenly understood my pain, but because Grant had exposed himself at the exact moment she could no longer explain him away. Frank pushed his chair back slightly. "I wanted to stay out of it," he said, "but staying out of it meant leaving you alone in it." He looked at me. "You deserved better from us." My mother was crying quietly. "Alyssa told us this was what you wanted," she said. "I should have called you. I should have asked my own son." "Yes," I said. She flinched, probably expecting me to tell her it was okay. It wasn't okay. "I am sorry," she said. "I believe you, but an apology doesn't put you in those seats." "I know." That was the right answer. Grant started talking again, saying this was a private matter and that everyone needed to calm down. I ended the call. Alyssa looked at me across the table. "What happens now?" I had already decided what I was willing to accept. "For things," I said, "the finances stay separated. You repay every dollar that went to Grant from your personal money. We go to marriage counseling. And all communication with Grant is limited to Leo, transparent, and at reasonable hours unless there is an emergency." Her face tightened. "You want to monitor my messages? I want no more hidden financial arrangements, private insults, or plans involving me that I am not allowed to know about." That sounds like punishment. These are not punishments. These are the minimum conditions for me to stay in a marriage where the truth matters. And if I say no, then we separate. My mother started to speak, but Frank touched her arm. This was not their decision. Alyssa looked around the table, perhaps hoping someone would tell me I was being harsh. No one did. June said, "He is offering conditions after you used his money to finance your ex and lied to his family. That is more choice than you gave him." Alyssa stood and left the room. I didn't follow. The next morning, I made an appointment with a family lawyer. I wasn't planning a war. I was making sure I didn't walk into another ambush blind. The lawyer explained what financial separation could look like, what records I should preserve, and how to protect myself without interfering with normal household expenses. We discussed the house, joint debts, and the fact that I had no automatic parental rights to Leo despite being one of his main caregivers for years. That last part hurt more than I expected. I took notes anyway. When I got home, Alyssa was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in front of her. Grant had sent 6 messages. None asked about Leo. He wanted money. He wanted to know whether she had persuaded me. He complained that relatives were questioning whether he could afford the house. He said the open house had made him look unstable. He accused Alyssa of promising support and failing to deliver. She slid the phone toward me. "I made you the backup," she said. I didn't answer immediately. She looked exhausted. I kept telling myself I was protecting peace. But I was protecting him from consequences because it made me feel like I was good at co-parenting. And every time he created a problem, you gave me the cost. She nodded. "You made me the backup and then called it peace." I know. That admission mattered. It didn't repair anything, but it was the first time she described what she had done without blaming my reaction. She agreed to the 4 conditions. The repayment took time. Alyssa sold a few things she had purchased recently, used her personal discretionary money, and set up a monthly transfer to restore the joint household funds. I kept the card locked and later closed it with her agreement. We opened a limited household account for shared bills, and everything else remained separate. Grant's open house image didn't survive. The vendor pursued him for the remaining balance. Relatives who had believed the house represented sudden success learned that much of what they saw had been rented for the evening. The house itself was not taken away overnight, and he wasn't arrested or exposed as some criminal mastermind. Reality was less theatrical and more embarrassing. He had overextended himself, staged stability he didn't have, and depended on my wife to quietly fill the gaps. Once people stopped applauding the image, he had to deal with the numbers. My parents apologized again a week later. This time, they came without excuses. Nora said, "I trusted the easier version because asking you might have created conflict." "You avoided conflict with Alyssa by placing it on me," I said. She nodded. "I did." Frank said, "I should have asked my son instead of taking the easier story." I accepted their apologies, but I didn't pretend the hurt disappeared. My mother had stood in another man's staged family photo while my name was being called across town. Forgiveness, if it came fully, would need more than one conversation. June never said "I told you so." She did, however, bring me a frame for my diploma. "Put it somewhere you can see it," she said. For a few weeks, I left it in the box. Marriage counseling began badly. Alyssa spent the first session explaining how much pressure she had felt. The counselor listened and then asked a simple question. "What did Cody agree to?" Alyssa said nothing. The counselor asked again, "Which part of this plan did your husband knowingly agree to?" "None of it," Alyssa admitted. That changed the direction of the session. We didn't walk out healed. There was no single speech that fixed 6 years of patterns. Alyssa had to sit with the fact that she had treated my patience as permission. I had to sit with the fact that I had helped create the pattern by swallowing smaller betrayals to keep the household calm. I began sleeping in the guest room, and I stayed there. We weren't pretending everything was normal for Leo. We also weren't fighting in front of him. Our conversations happened after he went to bed or in counseling. Grant's communication moved to a co-parenting app. Messages were limited to schedules, school, health, and activities. When he called late one night to complain about money, Alyssa didn't answer. The next morning, she sent one message asking whether there was an emergency involving Leo. There was not. That boundary should have existed years earlier. Leo noticed the changes, of course. Children always do. One afternoon after baseball practice, he climbed into the car and set his glove on the center console. "Are you still mad at Mom?" he asked. "I'm still working through some things with her." "Are you mad at Dad?" "I don't like some choices he made." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you still coming to my games?" "As long as I'm able and you want me there." "I want you there." "Then I'll be there." He looked relieved, but I didn't use that moment to recruit him to my side. I didn't tell him what Grant had said or what Alyssa had spent. He deserved the truth appropriate for a child, not the burden of adult evidence. A month after graduation, Leo walked past my office area and saw the diploma still leaning against the wall in its box. "You didn't hang it up," he said. "Not yet." "Can we?" I looked at him. "You want to help?" He nodded. We measured badly, made 2 pencil marks, and had to straighten the frame twice. When we finally stepped back, it was slightly off-center. Leo tilted his head. "It's crooked. A little. We can fix it." I looked at the diploma. For years, finishing that degree had represented a promise to myself. On graduation night, the empty seats had almost turned it into evidence that my achievement mattered less than everyone else's comfort. Hanging it with Leo changed that. Not because it repaired what the adults had done. It didn't. It reminded me that the accomplishment was mine before it belonged to anyone else's approval. Alyssa stood in the doorway watching us. She didn't make the moment about herself. She didn't apologize again. She simply said, "It looks good." Leo said, "It's crooked." For the first time in weeks, I laughed. I still hadn't made a final decision about divorce. I had the lawyer's notes, separate finances, counseling appointments, and a clear understanding of what leaving would require. Alyssa knew that staying married was no longer the default outcome just because I loved Leo or wanted to avoid disruption. Trust was no longer something she could request. It was something she would have to rebuild through repeated, boring honesty. My parents stopped letting her speak for me. Grant stopped receiving household money. The vacation never happened. The open house bills became his problem. And when someone tried to use Leo's name to end a conversation, I stopped allowing it. The man who walked off that stage alone would have once apologized for making everyone uncomfortable. I no longer confused discomfort with injustice. I didn't punish Alyssa for missing my graduation. I stopped rewarding her for choosing another man and calling it family. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.